Ethan Lawson had always been the kind of person who fixed things. Not the kind of person who simply followed instructions, but the kind who could see a problem, understand its cause, and find a way to fix it, no matter how broken or ancient the machine was. In his small town of Ridgeview, everyone knew him as the local mechanic who could repair anything. Cars, washing machines, even old farm equipment. If it could be fixed, Ethan was the one to call. He didn't have much in the way of formal training. Instead, Ethan learned everything by tinkering, asking questions, and spending countless hours in the dusty corners of his shop, surrounded by piles of spare parts and old blueprints. He was a hands-on kind of guy, and that's how he liked it. There were no frills in his life, just work, the occasional cold beer with friends, and his dreams of something bigger. Each day was a mirror of the one before it. His mornings were spent fixing broken-down vehicles, his afternoons restoring appliances, and his evenings involved catching up on whatever odd job someone had for him. Ridgeview was a sleepy town with a population just shy of 1,000, and most of the people there didn't think much beyond their small, peaceful lives. But Ethan, he often found himself gazing up at the stars, wondering what lay beyond the blue sky. He read stories about explorers and adventurers, imagining himself flying through the cosmos, discovering new planets, and solving mysteries of the universe. But of course, those dreams seemed as distant as the stars themselves. One evening, as Ethan wiped his hands on an oily rag and stretched his tired back, he glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The only light in the small town came from the occasional flicker of street lamps and the dim glow of his shop. The world outside was quiet, still, and peaceful. Ethan sighed. This was his life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was comfortable. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for something more, something far beyond the rusted cars and broken motors he repaired every day. As he was about to head inside for the night, the ground suddenly trembled beneath his feet. It wasn't an earthquake, but a strange, low hum that seemed to reverberate through the air itself. Ethan paused, his brow furrowing. He'd never felt anything like this before. His first thought was that something heavy had fallen, maybe a tree or a power line had snapped, but the tremor was too long to be caused by something so simple. He stepped outside, his eyes searching the night sky. At first, there was nothing. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flicker, a streak of light, racing across the sky at an unbelievable speed. It was so fast that for a second, he thought it was a shooting star, but the light was too bright, too controlled. And it didn't fade out. It grew larger and larger, getting closer by the second. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. Something was falling from the sky. The bright streak of light grew into a ball of fire, roaring like a thunderstorm as it crashed toward the ground. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he ran toward the desert on the edge of town, where the light had disappeared behind a hill. He didn't know why he was running or what he thought he would find, but he couldn't stand still. The hum in the air was growing louder now, and his curiosity pushed him forward. As he reached the top of the hill, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. There, embedded in the ground, was what could only be described as a massive object. A ship, though unlike any ship he had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and pulsating with a soft, glowing light. The impact had left a small crater in the earth, but the ship itself looked almost untouched. Its smooth surface reflected the pale moonlight, casting eerie shadows on the sand around it. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. Was it a military aircraft? A satellite? No, this was something far different. This was no human-made object, and it certainly wasn't from Earth. He cautiously approached, his boots crunching in the sand. The closer he got, the more the ship seemed to hum, as if it were alive. He reached out a hand, unsure of what to expect, but as his fingers brushed the cold surface, the ship seemed to respond. A panel near the edge of the craft began to shift, and a door opened, revealing a dim, flickering interior. Ethan hesitated. He was a mechanic, not an adventurer. But this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, something beyond anything he had ever imagined. The ship was calling to him, pulling him forward with an irresistible force. Without thinking, he stepped inside. The air was cool, and the faint hum of machinery filled the space around him. It was like stepping into a different world entirely. Metal walls, strange symbols etched into the surfaces, and lights that glowed in a way he couldn't explain. His heart raced. This was no ordinary ship. It was something ancient, something from far beyond Earth. And yet there was something about it that seemed almost familiar, as if it was waiting for him. Ethan looked around, his mind spinning with questions. Who built this ship? Where was it from? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do with it? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Ethan stood frozen at the entrance of the alien ship, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The moment he stepped inside, the door closed behind him with a soft hiss. The low hum of the ship grew louder, vibrating through his body, as if the craft itself was alive. For a few moments, all he could do was stand there, his wide eyes scanning the strange surroundings, taking in every detail. The ship's interior was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The walls were smooth, and the floors gleamed with an iridescent glow, almost as if the entire structure was made of metal and light. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly, their meanings completely unknown to him. But the most unusual part was the air. It wasn't stale or filled with the usual smell of machinery. Instead, it was fresh and strangely clean, almost like the air on a cool morning, making Ethan feel like he was in a place far beyond his comprehension. He stepped further into the craft, the door behind him closing silently. His heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure what he expected to find inside, but the eerie quietness of it all made him feel both awestruck and uneasy. He had to remind himself that he was still a mechanic, someone who could fix things, not a scientist or explorer. He shouldn't be here, but something, some force, kept pushing him forward. As he explored, Ethan found no obvious controls or panels. Everything seemed designed for a purpose he didn't yet understand. The only clear structure was a large circular console in the center of the room. At the edge of the console were glowing symbols, and in the middle of the circle was a large translucent orb. It looked almost like a giant, glowing crystal. It pulsed with light, gently breathing like a living creature. Ethan couldn't resist. His fingers hovered over the orb, drawn to its mysterious glow. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was making a mistake. But curiosity won out. He reached out and touched it. The instant his fingers made contact, the entire ship seemed to come alive. The hum deepened, and the lights on the walls flickered in a rhythmic pattern. It was as if the ship was responding to him, acknowledging his presence. Ethan's heart raced with excitement. Could it be possible that the ship recognized him? Or was this all just some kind of strange coincidence? Suddenly, there was a sharp noise, a low metallic scraping sound coming from somewhere deep within the ship. Ethan spun around, eyes wide, searching for the source. The ship seemed to be reacting to something, perhaps a hidden mechanism or a piece of machinery that had just powered on. He took a few cautious steps forward, his breath shallow. Every instinct told him to turn back, to leave the ship before things went too far. But another part of him, something deep down, urged him to keep moving forward. He followed the sound down a narrow hallway that twisted deeper into the craft. The walls of the ship seemed to narrow as he went, the faintly glowing symbols intensifying the further he walked. It was as if the ship was pulling him toward something important. Ethan rounded a corner and froze. At the end of the hallway, lying motionless on the floor, was a figure. It was unlike any being he had ever seen. Its skin was a translucent shade of blue, and its body was long and slender, with features that seemed almost human, but just slightly different. Its face was angular, its eyes large and dark, yet closed in a peaceful, almost serene way. Despite its strange appearance, there was no mistaking it for anything other than an alien. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like this before. Was this an alien? Was it dead? He took a few slow steps toward it, cautiously kneeling down to examine the creature more closely. Its chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, a sign that it was still alive, barely. Ethan quickly checked its pulse. It was weak, but there. His heart raced as he realized that the creature needed help. It had crashed here, injured, and now it was at his mercy. There was no one else around, no one to call, just him and this mysterious being from another world. Without thinking, Ethan pulled off his jacket and draped it over the creature's body for warmth. He needed to do something. He was a mechanic, but his skills didn't extend to medicine. Still, he had an instinct to fix things, to make them work. And this alien, whatever it was, needed him to fix it. Okay, he whispered to himself. I can do this. His mind raced as he looked around the room, trying to find anything that might help him stabilize the alien. It seemed like the ship itself was full of technology beyond his understanding, but there had to be something he could use. He spotted a strange panel on the wall, similar to the one he had touched earlier. This time, it was covered in intricate symbols and glowing lights, almost like a control system. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he realized that these symbols looked similar to the ones on the alien's body. He rushed to the panel, his fingers brushing against the symbols. The moment his hand made contact, the panel lit up, and a series of sounds echoed throughout the ship. A soft voice, unrecognizable but somehow soothing, filled the air. It was the ship, or perhaps the alien itself, trying to communicate with him. Hold on, Ethan muttered under his breath. I'll figure this out. He worked quickly, searching for anything that might indicate how to heal or stabilize the alien. Time was running out. He knew that if he didn't act fast, the creature might not survive. His hands moved over the controls, desperately trying to make sense of the alien technology. Suddenly, the panel emitted a bright pulse of light, and the alien's body jerked, its eyes snapping open. Ethan jumped back in shock, but the creature didn't appear frightened. Instead, it looked at him with deep, understanding eyes. It was alive, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he was part of something far bigger than himself. Ethan stepped back, his heart hammering in his chest. The alien's eyes, dark as the night, locked onto his with an intensity that made him freeze in place. For a moment, neither of them moved. The creature's breath came in shallow, but steady gasps, and its chest slowly rose and fell. Its long, thin fingers twitched slightly, as if it was slowly waking up from a deep sleep. Ethan couldn't help but stare. The alien's face, though somewhat human in shape, was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its skin, a soft translucent blue, seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the ship. Its features were sharp, almost delicate, with high cheekbones and a narrow nose. Its eyes, though large, were full of an unspoken intelligence. But more than anything, Ethan noticed the alien's gaze. It was calm, understanding, and strangely trusting. He blinked, unsure of what to do. He had no experience with aliens, no idea what this creature wanted or how to communicate with it. But he knew one thing. It was alive, and he was responsible for helping it. The creature's chest rose and fell more steadily now, and Ethan could see it trying to move, its arms twitching as if testing its strength. But it seemed too weak to sit up. Without thinking, Ethan rushed over to its side and knelt down. He gently placed his hand on its shoulder, hoping to offer some comfort. "Hey, take it easy," Ethan whispered softly, unsure if the alien even understood him. His voice was full of uncertainty, but there was no harm in trying. "You're going to be okay." The alien didn't respond verbally, but it seemed to acknowledge him with a slight tilt of its head. Then it extended a hand toward Ethan, its long fingers moving cautiously. He held his breath, unsure of whether to trust the creature. But after a moment, he decided to let it happen. The alien's hand brushed lightly against his. The touch was cool, but there was something comforting about it, something that made Ethan feel connected to it. The creature's eyes met his again, and this time, it seemed to convey a sense of gratitude, a sense of understanding. Ethan didn't know how, but he felt like the alien was trying to tell him something. It wasn't speaking with words, but there was an unspoken connection between them, a bond that transcended language. For some reason, Ethan felt like he could understand it, not in the way of clear words, but in the way of emotions and intentions. The alien's fingers gently curled around Ethan's hand, and for the first time since it had awoken, it seemed to relax. Its breathing became deeper and more regular. Ethan felt a sense of relief. Maybe he was doing something right. Maybe he could help this strange being after all. But how? The ship was full of technology he didn't understand, and there was no guidebook on how to treat an alien species. Ethan glanced around, hoping to find something that might help. That's when he noticed something. On the wall behind the alien, hidden in the shadows, was a series of symbols glowing faintly. They looked similar to the ones he had seen on the ship's control panel earlier. The shapes were intricate, delicate, and foreign, but there was something about them that drew his attention. Maybe they weren't just decoration. Ethan rose to his feet and moved over to the wall, his eyes scanning the glowing symbols. His fingers brushed against the surface, and to his surprise, the symbols shifted under his touch, moving in a sequence he couldn't understand. The hum of the ship grew louder, and the faint light from the wall illuminated the space in front of him. A soft voice echoed in the air, speaking in a language that was completely alien to him. Ethan jumped back, startled. But as he stepped away, the voice faded, and the symbols on the wall returned to their original positions. There was a moment of silence, and then the ship seemed to react. A soft click came from somewhere deep within the ship, followed by a low hum. The room around him seemed to pulse with energy, as if the ship itself was awakening. Ethan turned back to the alien, who was now sitting up, its eyes fixed on the wall. It seemed to recognize something, a connection between the ship and the symbols. The alien's gaze shifted to Ethan, then back to the wall, as if urging him to understand. Feeling a sudden surge of confidence, Ethan approached the wall again. He placed his hand on one of the glowing symbols, and this time it felt different. There was no longer just a hum. The symbol beneath his palm seemed to respond to his touch, almost as if it was scanning him. Ethan's mind raced. Could this be how the ship communicated? Could the symbols somehow allow him to understand the alien's language? The voice returned, but this time it was softer, slower, and there was something familiar about it. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he realized that the ship wasn't just reacting to him. It was trying to teach him how to communicate. He concentrated hard, focusing on the sounds coming from the walls. The voice spoke again, this time slower, and Ethan, through some unexplainable instinct, felt the words settle in his mind. He couldn't translate them exactly, but he could understand the meaning. The alien spoke. Its voice was soft, the words flowing slowly and deliberately. But this time, Ethan could hear the words in his mind, clear and distinct. It was speaking to him. "I am called Selor," the voice said, the sound of the name resonating in Ethan's mind. "I am a traveler. My ship is broken." Ethan blinked, astonished. The alien was communicating with him directly. Zelor continued, speaking in the same gentle tone. "You have helped me. Thank you." Ethan didn't know what to say. For a moment, all he could do was stare, trying to make sense of everything happening around him. He was speaking with an alien, helping it repair its ship, and somehow it seemed like he was being asked to help save it. The alien's gaze softened as it slowly reached for Ethan's hand again. This time, there was no fear, only a shared understanding. Ethan nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll help you," he said. "We'll fix this ship together." And just like that, without fully knowing how or why, Ethan knew his life would never be the same again. The bond between Ethan and Sailor deepened with each passing moment. The alien's words, though strange at first, began to feel more natural as the days went by. Sailor's voice, soft yet clear in Ethan's mind, had become a constant presence. It wasn't just the language that had changed. Something about their connection felt different, as if the ship itself had drawn them closer together, both in body and mind. For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't feel alone. He had a purpose, something far greater than the dusty town he had left behind. He was part of something extraordinary, something that spanned across the stars. He had never imagined that fixing a ship would lead him to an encounter like this. The alien craft had many layers, each one more complex than the last. The deeper they explored it, the more they discovered hidden secrets. It wasn't just a ship, it was a sanctuary, a vast and intricate network of rooms, corridors, and chambers. Ethan was fascinated by every corner, every piece of technology that was far beyond his understanding. Yet with Sailor's guidance, he found himself picking up on the language of the ship, learning how to operate the panels, how to read the symbols, and how to access the ship's systems. But there was one part of the ship that Sailor seemed particularly reluctant to show him. One evening, as the sun began to set over Ridgeview, casting an orange glow over the landscape, Sailor led Ethan deeper into the ship. The walls grew thicker, and the soft hum that had filled the air earlier became more of a low, constant vibration underfoot. Ethan followed silently, unsure of where they were headed. Sailor moved with a purpose, its movements graceful despite its earlier weakness. They stopped at a large door, a door that seemed different from the others. This one had no glowing symbols, no patterns to decipher, just a plain, dark surface. Sailor hesitated for a moment, and Ethan noticed the alien's fingers twitching as if it were unsure about opening it. Finally, the ship responded to Sailor's touch, the door slowly sliding open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the room was vast, stretching far beyond what the exterior of the ship had promised. It was filled with strange machines and panels, some of which Ethan could recognize as engines and power sources, but others were completely unfamiliar. There was one object in the center of the room, covered by a sheet of translucent material. It looked like a large cylindrical device, and it pulsed with a faint, steady glow. "This is the heart of the ship," Sailor's voice echoed in Ethan's mind. The words were heavy with meaning. "It powers everything, but it is broken." Ethan's eyes widened. The heart of the ship, that's what had been keeping everything running. He stepped forward, drawn to the object in the center. There was something about it that seemed both beautiful and dangerous, like the ship itself was alive, and this was its core. "How can it be fixed?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. He could feel the weight of the question, the responsibility that came with it. If this device wasn't repaired, the ship would never leave Earth. Sailor would be stranded forever. "I do not know," Sailor responded. "I am not skilled in this part of the ship. The heart is unlike anything I have encountered before. It is ancient, even by my species' standards." Ethan approached the glowing object, carefully examining it. There were no buttons, no obvious switches, nothing to suggest that it was designed for repair. It was smooth, like glass, and it glimmered in the dim light of the room. Sailor seemed to read his thoughts. "The heart responds to energy," the alien said. "Your touch, your energy. That is why you are here." Ethan frowned. "My energy? What do you mean?" "The heart is not just a machine," Sailor explained. "It is connected to those who built the ship. They were able to communicate with it through their minds, through their energy. They did not control it with their hands. They became one with it." Ethan's mind raced. He was beginning to understand. This wasn't just a mechanical repair. It was something deeper, something spiritual. The heart of the ship was not merely a piece of technology to be fixed. It was a part of the ship itself, and perhaps a part of something greater. "I can't do this alone," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to Sailor. He was a mechanic, not a psychic. How could he possibly communicate with this thing? "You are not alone," Zaylor said, its voice calm. "I am here." Ethan looked back at the alien, who was standing silently beside him. The connection between them was strong now, stronger than ever. Zaylor had guided him this far, and maybe, just maybe, it could guide him through this next step as well. With a deep breath, Ethan placed his hand on the heart of the ship. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him. It wasn't painful, but it was powerful, like an electric current running through his veins. His mind seemed to expand, and for a split second, it felt as though he was no longer just Ethan Lawson, the mechanic from Ridgeview. He was part of something greater, part of the ship itself. The glowing object pulsed beneath his touch, responding to the energy he had unknowingly channeled. He could feel the ship's power, its life force, as if it were a living entity. The symbols on the walls of the room flickered in response, aligning with the pulse of the heart. Suddenly, a vision flashed before his eyes. It was a memory, a distant one. He saw beings, tall and ethereal, working with the ship. They were not human, but they were graceful, moving in perfect harmony with the craft. They were in sync with the ship's heart, communicating with it as though it were an extension of themselves. Ethan pulled his hand back in surprise, but the image remained in his mind. Understood now. The heart of the ship was more than just a machine. It was a living, breathing entity that needed to be understood and respected. He turned to Zaylor. "I think I understand," he said, his voice filled with awe. It's not just a repair. It's a connection. I need to become part of the ship. I need to work with it." Zaylor nodded slowly, its dark eyes filled with quiet understanding. "Yes," the alien said. "You are the one who can fix it. You and the ship, together." Ethan looked back at the heart of the ship, determination filling his chest. This wasn't going to be easy, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. This was his destiny now, to help fix the ship, to unlock the secrets of the stars, and to understand his place in this vast, mysterious universe. Ethan stood still, his hand still resting on the glowing heart of the ship. The pulsating light beneath his fingers filled his mind with strange images. Alien symbols, glowing patterns, and memories that felt not his own. His heart raced, his body humming with the strange energy of the ship. He could feel it. He was connected to something much larger than himself. This was no longer just about fixing the ship. It was about understanding a living being, a powerful entity that had existed long before he had ever been born. The vision faded, leaving Ethan feeling both amazed and overwhelmed. He had never felt anything like that before. It was as though the ship's heart had given him a glimpse of its past, its purpose. But there was so much more to uncover, so much more to understand. Zaylor, who had been silent beside him, took a slow step forward. Its dark eyes studied Ethan carefully, as though waiting for him to say something, to process the strange connection they had just shared. Ethan finally pulled his hand away from the ship's heart, feeling a strange emptiness in the air. The energy had left him, and yet he felt more alive than ever before. "This is incredible," Ethan whispered. "But how do I fix it? I don't know how to repair something like this." He gestured toward the glowing heart. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix engines, machines, not this." Zaylor's voice filled his mind again, calm and soothing. "You are not just a mechanic, Ethan Lawson. You have been chosen for a reason. You have the knowledge, the instinct, and the heart to repair what is broken." Ethan shook his head, unsure whether to believe Zaylor or not. "But what if I fail? What if I don't understand enough to help you? This is beyond anything I've ever seen before." "The heart is broken," Zaylor said gently, "but it is not beyond repair. You must trust yourself, Ethan. Trust the connection you feel with the ship. The ship is waiting for you to unlock the final piece." Ethan took a deep breath, nodding slowly. He couldn't deny it anymore. Something had changed. There was no turning back now. He had already begun this journey, and now he would see it through. He had to. "I'm going to try," he said with determination. Sailor's eyes softened in understanding. "I will be here to guide you." With renewed focus, Ethan turned back to the heart of the ship. He studied it carefully, his mind racing with possibilities. There had to be something he was missing, some key to unlocking its power. He ran his fingers over the surface of the heart, feeling its pulse, trying to sense its rhythm. Then he noticed something. The heart was not just glowing. There were subtle lines etched into its surface, faint and almost invisible unless you looked closely. They resembled the symbols on the walls of the ship, the same symbols he had come to recognize as the ship's language. These lines weren't random. They were a pattern, a code. Ethan's mind clicked. This wasn't just about energy. The heart was alive, but it needed something more. It needed the right sequence of energy, the right connection of symbols. It wasn't a mechanical fix. It was a matter of unlocking the right pattern, of tapping into the ship's consciousness. He turned back to the walls of the room, where the same symbols now seemed to be glowing brighter. The symbols pulsed in time with the heart, as if they were calling to him, guiding him. Taking a deep breath, Ethan moved to the wall and placed his hand on the closest symbol. The moment his skin made contact, a wave of energy surged through him. He gasped, feeling the electricity course through his body once again. The symbol beneath his hand shifted, rearranging itself before his eyes. The others on the wall ended, following the pattern he was creating. Ethan's heart raced. He could feel the ship's pulse sensing with his own. The symbols on the wall were now working together, combining to form a larger picture. The glow grew brighter, the ship's hum more intense. Zeller's voice filled his mind once again, calm but urgent. "You are close, Ethan. You are unlocking the heart." Ethan didn't speak. He didn't have to. His focus was entirely on the task at hand. He moved from symbol to symbol, his fingers gliding over them, connecting the dots, aligning the pieces. With each touch, the heart's glow grew stronger, and the ship around him seemed to vibrate with life. Suddenly, there was a sharp noise, a click, deep within the ship. Ethan froze. The hum of the ship intensified, and the walls of the room seemed to pulse with energy. The heart beneath his fingers began to glow brighter than ever before. Its light flooded the room, casting strange shadows across the walls. The glow spread outward, filling the entire ship, reaching into every corner, every hallway. Ethan stepped back, amazed. The ship was alive again, the energy flowing through its systems, reigniting its dormant power. The heart was no longer broken. It was healing. But then, something unexpected happened. A loud, rumbling sound echoed through the ship, shaking the floor beneath Ethan's feet. The walls around him trembled, and the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. Taylor's voice, now filled with urgency, reached his mind. "Ethan, the ship is awakening, but it is unstable. You must stabilize it before it collapses." Panic surged through Ethan. What was happening? Had he made a mistake? Was the ship going to explode? He didn't know what to do. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I need you to help me," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't know how to stabilize the ship on his own, but he couldn't let it fall apart now, not when it had come so far. "I will," Zaylor's voice reassured him. "Together, we will stabilize the ship, but you must trust me." Ethan nodded, feeling the alien's presence in his mind. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. With Sailor's guidance, Ethan worked quickly, adjusting the energy flow, connecting the final pieces of the puzzle. Slowly, the rumbling stopped. The trembling of the walls faded. The glow of the heart became steady once again. The ship had been restored. Ethan stood in awe, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths of relief. The heart of the ship was fixed, and it was alive again, humming with energy, ready to move once more. "You did it," Zaylor said, its voice filled with quiet pride. "The ship is stable. And you have proven yourself. Ethan smiled, feeling the surge of pride and accomplishment. He had done it. He had fixed the unfixable, not just with tools, but with understanding, trust, and the power of connection. He turned to Xaler. "We did it," he said. "Together." The ship was silent now. The energy that had surged through the heart only moments ago had calmed, and the once unsteady hum was now a smooth rhythmic sound that filled every corner of the craft. Ethan stood in the center of the room, his hand still resting lightly on the heart of the ship. He could feel the power flowing through him, through the ship, and he felt connected in a way that was hard to describe. Xaler stood beside him, its presence quiet but comforting. The alien didn't need to say anything. Ethan could feel its approval, its understanding. They had done it. The ship was fixed. But there was still something in the air, something unspoken. Xaler had said that the ship was stable, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the full picture yet. He knew that something more awaited them, something they still had to face. "We did it," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "But what happens now?" Xaler's voice answered in his mind, calm and thoughtful. "Now we awaken the ship fully. You have repaired the heart, but there is still much to do. The ship has been dormant for so long. We must bring it to life, and only you can do that." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. He had no idea what was coming next, but he felt ready. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. Xaler led Ethan to the central control room of the ship. It was a vast space, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. The walls were lined with panels, each covered in glowing symbols and strange markings. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone, and the entire room hummed with a low, steady vibration. In the center of the room stood a massive console, far more advanced than anything he had ever worked with back on Earth. "This is where it begins," Xaler said, its voice echoing in Ethan's mind. "The ship needs its core systems to be brought online. You must activate them." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes scanning the console. It was a maze of buttons, switches, and strange interfaces that he couldn't even begin to understand. But he wasn't afraid. He had already fixed the heart of the ship. Now he just had to trust his instincts again. He placed his hands on the console, feeling the cool surface beneath his fingers. The moment he did, the symbols on the walls flickered, glowing brighter in response to his touch. The ship seemed to stir, as though it were waking from a deep slumber. The hum of the ship grew louder, stronger, more powerful. Ethan took a deep breath and pressed the first button he saw. The console buzzed, and the symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. A deep rumbling sound filled the room, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if he had made a mistake. But Xaler's voice reassured him, calm and steady. "You are doing well, Ethan. Keep going." Encouraged by Xaler's words, Ethan continued to work, pressing buttons, adjusting levers, and twisting dials. With each movement, the ship responded. The energy flow began to stabilize. The lights grew brighter, and the rumbling ceased, replaced by the steady hum of a fully awakened craft. Ethan smiled, a sense of accomplishment filling him. He had never felt anything like this before. The ship, the heart, everything. It all seemed to be alive, and he was a part of it. But as he continued to work, something strange began to happen. The air around him seemed to grow heavier. A chill crept along his skin, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Ethan's heart began to race as he felt a shift in the atmosphere. Something was wrong. Xaler's voice in his mind was no longer calm. It was filled with urgency. "Ethan, stop. Do not activate the last sequence." Ethan froze. His fingers hovered over a glowing red button. It was the last one, the final step to bringing the ship's systems fully online. But Xaler's warning had been clear. "Why? What's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky. "The ship's core systems are linked to more than just power," Xaler explained quickly. There is a fail-safe mechanism, one that was placed long ago to protect the ship from outside threats. If you activate it, you will unleash something dangerous. Ethan's mind raced. What kind of danger? Zaylor hesitated. I do not know. The fail-safe was designed to protect the ship from threats, but its true purpose is not clear to me. We need to find another way to fully activate the ship without triggering it. Ethan pulled his hand back from the console, his heart pounding. What was this fail-safe, and why had the ship been built to protect itself in such a way? These were questions he didn't have answers to, but he couldn't risk triggering something that could destroy them both. We need to find a way around it, Ethan said, his voice steady now, determined. We can't just leave the ship half awake. Zaller's voice was filled with quiet concern. You are right, but it will not be easy. The fail-safe is built into the ship's core, deeply embedded in its systems. We will need to search the ship for a way to bypass it. The answer lies somewhere within the ship's ancient archives. Ethan nodded, a new sense of resolve forming within him. The ship had been dormant for so long, and now, after everything he had done to restore it, they were at a crossroads. But he wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when they were so close. We'll find another way, Ethan said. We'll fix it. Zaller's presence in his mind was calm, but filled with quiet gratitude. You are brave, Ethan. And you are right. Together, we will uncover the truth. We will awaken the ship fully, and nothing will stand in our way. The two of them left the control room, the tension in the air still thick, but their resolve stronger than ever. They had come so far. Now, they would go even further. The ship had secrets, and Ethan was determined to unlock them all. As they moved through the vast corridors of the ship, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead, what other dangers awaited them. And what was the true purpose of the ship, this ancient craft that had traveled across the stars? But he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a mechanic from a small town. He was part of something much bigger. He was part of the ship's journey, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Ethan walked down the dark hallway, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the ship. The air was thick with anticipation. The ship had come alive, yet they had only uncovered a fraction of its mysteries. Despite everything they had accomplished so far, the biggest challenge still lay ahead. Zaylor had been quiet since their conversation in the control room. The alien presence was still there, in Ethan's mind, but now it felt like a distant whisper, guiding him rather than speaking directly. Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of what they had to do next. We need to find the archives, Zaylor said, breaking the silence. Its voice sounded more distant now, like it was deep in thought. They are the key to understanding the fail-safe mechanism. The answer lies within them. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the walls of the ship. The ship was vast, far larger than anything he had ever imagined. The corridors twisted and turned, with unfamiliar symbols and markings on the walls. It was like navigating a maze. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ship had come to life, but it still felt like there was something hidden, something waiting just beyond reach. But there was no turning back now. They had to find the archives. They finally reached what looked like an enormous door at the end of the hall. The door was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. It was covered in glowing symbols, each one pulsing with a faint light. The design was intricate, delicate, like the ship itself was alive, breathing. This is it, Zaylor said, its voice full of quiet excitement. The archives are beyond this door. Ethan stepped forward, his hand resting on the cool surface of the door. The moment he touched it, the symbols on the door began to shift, rearranging themselves in a pattern he couldn't quite understand. There was a low hum, and the door slowly creaked open. Beyond the door lay a vast chamber, filled with rows upon rows of strange consoles, glowing screens, and complex machinery. Ethan's heart raced as he stepped into the room, his eyes wide in awe. The walls were covered in more symbols, more markings, This was a place of knowledge, of history. This is where the ship's secrets are stored, Zaylor explained. The archive told everything, its history, its purpose, and most importantly, the information about the fail-safe mechanism. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He walked toward the nearest console, running his fingers over its smooth surface. The moment his hand touched the console, the room around him seemed to come alive. Lights flickered, and the consoles powered on, displaying streams of strange text and images. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. There were so many symbols, so much information, and he knew that he had to find the right one, something that would help them disable the failsafe. As Ethan moved from console to console, he couldn't help but notice that the ship's heartbeat, the steady hum that had filled the air since he first repaired the heart, was growing louder again. It was as though the ship was reacting to his presence, responding to his efforts. But this time, the hum didn't feel comforting. It felt uneasy. Something was wrong. He stopped in front of a large screen that had lit up with strange, glowing symbols. The symbols on the screen flickered and rearranged, much like the ones on the walls. Then, as if it were a message meant for him, one symbol remained. It was a circle with a jagged line running through the center, like a warning sign. That symbol, Zaylor said, its voice filled with urgency. It's the fail-safe. It's the key. Ethan's stomach sank. The fail-safe. The very thing they had been trying to avoid. The symbol was now clear in front of him, its warning impossible to ignore. It was embedded deep within the ship's systems. It wasn't just a mechanism. It was a part of the ship's core, a built-in defense that would trigger if certain conditions were met. But what does it mean? Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. What happens if we disable it? Zaylor's voice was quiet, almost solemn. If we disable it without understanding its full purpose, we risk everything. The fail-safe is designed to protect the ship from external threats, but it is also tied to something much older. The ship's creators, those who built it, knew of dangers that no longer exist. They left the fail-safe in place to guard against threats they believed could still arise. Ethan's mind was racing. This was no ordinary ship. It had a history, a purpose that stretched far beyond what he had imagined. It was more than just a machine. It was a vessel with a legacy. He reached for the controls, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. They couldn't just leave it here. The fail-safe needed to be disabled, but they had to understand its true nature first. He typed in a series of commands, trying to access more information about the fail-safe. The screens around him flickered as streams of data poured in. Symbols shifted and rearranged, and Ethan's eyes widened as he saw a pattern emerge. It was a map of the ship's systems, showing where the fail-safe was embedded. But there was more. There was a second symbol, hidden deep within the data, one that he hadn't seen before. It was the same jagged line, but this time, it was connected to a new, unfamiliar shape. What is that? Ethan asked, pointing to the new symbol. That is the core, Zaylor said, its voice filled with awe. The true core of the ship. The fail-safe is linked to it. If we disable it, the entire ship will change. The core will react, and we do not know what will happen. Ethan took a step back, his mind filled with doubt. He didn't want to risk everything, not when they had come so far. But the truth was clear. They had to disable the fail-safe to awaken the ship fully. We don't have a choice, Ethan said, his voice firm. We have to do it. We need to trust the ship. With a deep breath, Ethan pressed the button that would disable the fail-safe. The room trembled as a low rumble echoed through the ship. For a moment, the lights flickered, and the hum of the ship grew louder. Then, everything stopped. The room was silent. Ethan looked at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he done the right thing? Would the ship react in a way they couldn't control? Suddenly, the ship seemed to stir again. The walls hummed with energy, the lights brighter than before. It wasn't the fail-safe that had been triggered. It was the ship coming to life, fully awake. "We did it," Xailor said, its voice filled with quiet pride. "The ship is fully awakened." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The ship was no longer just a machine. It was alive. They had unlocked its secrets, and now they were ready to face whatever came next.